What is up, y'all? Welcome in to the college football AP poll reaction show. Adam Kramer and Paige Kuhn from the No Punts Allowed podcast here. And Adam, we have a new number one with Ohio State, and Alabama takes a tumble down 13 spots, which we think is fair. But at first
Yes,
glance, is there anything else that sticks out to you in this AP poll?
we are using preseason rankings we're holding them close again,
Yes.
Paige, right? Like this is what we do. I love preseason rankings. I hate them. This is a week to be bold. You have 1 week of data, right? You have 1 week of data, voters. Use the data to your advantage. Florida State should be higher. We'll talk about that and more, but I hate this every year because preseason rankings shouldn't influence these first batch of rankings, and they certainly are.
All right. Well, we are going to
I'm already
walk you
mad.
guys through 25 to 1. Get in the chat because this is our favorite part of doing this show is you guys telling us what you think about these rankings. By the way, just want to clarify these are not our rankings. These
Thank
are
you.
AP poll voter rankings. We like to clarify every year. But let's get right into it. Let's start with the number 25 team, a team that you and I both really love and think deserves to be in the top 25, maybe should have been preseason top 25, but that is Utah.
Why aren't they higher? Like, why? How many performances did we see this week that were more impressive than Utah's? They played somebody in UCLA. They went on the road.
Well,
Uh, yeah, fair to be determined. But they revamped their offense, obviously, with Dampier at quarterback. Defensively, this was also a really nice change. Time will tell. But again, we have one data point. I thought this was one of the more impressive showings that we saw. You can be bold, AP poll voters. Put Utah up a little bit higher because just offensively, Paige, I don't know if we've seen Utah look like that in a really long time.
yes. Next up, we've got Texas Tech, the other Big 12 team that we are super high on. Obviously, the transfer portal class is what people like to point to, but I think a solid performance to start the year. But your thoughts on Texas Tech?
Yeah, I mean, you're playing what? Arkansas Pine Bluff. So you
Yeah.
hold serve. You're playing Kent State this week. We were joking before we came on. They're 47-point favorites. We're not going to find out about Texas Tech until they play at Utah, which could be a heck of a game in a few weeks.
So I will say this. I think Texas Tech, we're in an era where we're seeing a lot of people call for teams to play hard schedules to start the season. If you're in the Big 12, I don't think you should do that. So I think Utah, sure, the UCLA logo and title may look like a big team that they're playing, but if I'm Texas Tech, I'm good with keeping those easy wins at the beginning because again, your schedule is going to be a little tricky going through that Big 12 that's pretty much wide open.
This is a team, by the way, you'll get others that surprise that are outside the top 25 because of Tech's schedule being what it is. It is what it is. This is a team liable to fall out in the next few weeks. And then if they play well, they'll be right back in. It's the way it goes.
All right, Indiana out of the Big Ten, obviously big storyline last year. Fall three in the rankings. What are your thoughts here on Indiana?
Old Dominion, we wrote about them before the season. It's a team that's been playing a lot better. New quarterback, what, 27-14? Unimpressive, but I think Old Dominion's a little bit better than many give them credit for. Still, maybe a little bit of concern. This schedule is brutal, though, Paige. Like, and I mean brutal, not good. Like, they play Kennesaw, they play Indiana State, then they play Illinois. So, again, like Texas Tech, going to be a minute before we figure out exactly what we have.
Now, in the chat, BT Jordan said USF needs to be ranked 25, and that, of course, is because they beat Boise State. Boise State falling out of the top 25. This is a team that we are
Yeah.
going to learn more about, and if they are serious in that group of five conversation. But any thoughts there in response to that?
I don't hate the take. It gets
Yeah.
a little crowded there, and they certainly did more than some of the other teams ranked did. That was a Boise State team that looks like it missed their best player in Ashton Genty. So, to your point, they play Florida this week. They're a 2.5 touchdown underdog. If they play competitive, they don't have to win that game. If they play competitive, I think to your point, that helps a lot when it comes to that group of five team because it's wide open now with the Boise loss.
All right, at 22, we had Tennessee. Obviously, big conversation of the offseason was losing Nico Iamaleava. They get Joey Aguilar, who I think put up a great performance for his first showing for Tennessee fans. I think Tennessee is going to be better than most people think. I think they thought having a quarterback come in late in the offseason was going to be a little difficult, but I think this team looked relatively solid. Obviously, competition will get tougher as time goes on, but impressive first start there.
I thought he looked great. No,
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think there was continuity. Like there was a good vibe Concern I have injuries in the secondary. Injuries have not been kind to them, so we'll see what happens there as the weeks progress. Georgia in a couple of weeks, huge game coming up, as you alluded to, and then from there you dip into Alabama, Oklahoma. But I'm with you, team we talked about in the preseason that for once feels like we're not talking about enough.
All right, well, a team we talk about all the time, and the whole weekend was talking about Alabama and their loss to Florida State and their embarrassing loss to Florida State. I'm going to give Florida State credit. We will talk about them when we get to them at 14, so I'm going to leave that for going in on what that team looks like in that rebuild. Alabama specifically. I'm panicked. If I'm an Alabama fan, I am worried. I am worried because not only was it just that they lost, it's how they lost. And then again, I'm also worried because I watched that Kalen DeBoer press conference. Post game, he said they were prepared, then was questioning the reporter asking him about those comments in his Monday presser. I think really it it's just not the Alabama we're used to. You got Johnny Manziel going on podcasts and shows saying nobody's afraid of them boys anymore. I sort of agree. I think Vandy called their shot last year, and then this year Florida State. I don't know. This seems like panic level. And in college football playoff, is it even an option? And how many games can they actually win?
It's a mess. It's a mess. The schedule does not set up very well for a team that looks like it's going to have struggles across the offensive and defensive line. That, to me, to your point, the optics weren't great. Effort, right? Twitter, of course, was investigating this in the film, showing loafing all over the place. You never saw that under Nick Saban.
Yeah.
But to get pushed around by a team that won, what, 2 games the year prior, we'll give Florida State credit in a minute.
Yes.
The optics are not good. And I thought Simpson played okay at quarterback when he had a chance. The fact of the matter is he didn't have a chance. They also ran the ball terribly. Like again, this is an Alabama identity that we're so used to. They have lost it and they're going to have to find a way to find it. There's talent there, obviously. But yes, it's okay to start panicking for a team that I did not expect to be talking about in the way we're talking about them this week.
Yeah, no, it is brutal. The chat saying Alabama shouldn't be ranked. I think a lot of people, including us, would kind of agree at this point in
Yeah,
time. Again, the biggest thing for Alabama though is how they come out week 2. I know their opponent is not super tough, but it's like, how do you respond to something like that? Because I think that's going to tell you everything you need to know about this team going forward.
yeah, long way to go. This is one where we don't want to panic. We're not going to do the Bill Belichick thing. It's a little bit different with Bama. There is talent there, but given what we saw last year, this feels like a continuation. No matter how hard DeBoer is trying to say this is a different team, trouble ahead, and the games are going to get tougher. What Georgia in a couple of weeks, right? Coming up here. I mean, that's it. It does not bode well right now for the Crimson Tide.
Yes, and I know you guys want us to get to that top 10 because there are a lot of comments about those teams up at the top. We will get there. And a reminder, this AP poll is the legit AP poll, not our
Thank
rankings
you.
of this. So just another reminder, partially the way through this. But let's start with 20, Ole Miss. What do you think?
It's fine, right? George, you started a little bit slow with a new quarterback and Simmons, turned the ball over a couple of different times. I'm really curious, and this is going to be a theme for these teams. Early road tests. Now, Kentucky did not look great, but this is an Ole Miss team that has lost games that they shouldn't. And obviously, they know Kentucky pretty well. So going on the road, I think it was a single digits point spread. I think it's a lot for Lane Kiffin and a young quarterback that, again, got to limit turnovers. But Ole Miss offensively probably going to be fine. It's just a matter of how long it takes.
Texas A&M, you were pretty high on coming into the season. After week 1, how are you feeling about that take? Still feel very solid about
I,
it?
I do. Yeah, we saw Marcel Reed as a passer, 4 touchdowns, completed the ball well. Again, competition not incredible, but a decent team in UTSA, maybe giving up a little bit more yards and points than we would expect to see with an Elko defense, but want to see what the quarterback's going to do. So I think, again, for a team like that, the competition is going to get brutal at some point. You want to see progress on offense, so I'll absolutely take that.
Yeah. Next up, we have Oklahoma at 18. John Mateer was probably one of the most hype guys behind Arch Manning.
Yeah.
And I will say his debut went a little bit better than
Oh, yeah.
Arch's, which of course we will talk about. But he broke Baker's OU debut record with 392 yards versus Illinois State, of course. They have a big matchup coming up this week versus Michigan, and we'll get a better idea of where this team is at. But I want to hype him up for the fact that he lived up to what the hype was in the offseason. This Oklahoma schedule, we've talked about it a lot, is really difficult as the time goes on. But I do think it is something to mention where, hey, the start of it wasn't shaky. There were no cobwebs. It was an easy transition for him there.
Competition, obviously, a big part of the discussion, but when you watch
Yes.
him, it looks like a miserable player to have to guard and scheme against. So, in terms of quarterback, we'll talk about Michigan, but this is really interesting in Mateer versus Underwood because I thought both guys came out and really made some good impressions. So again, starts this week. Oklahoma is a small home favorite against a team that has a lot of buzz in Michigan, and we'll find out more. The interesting thing here, Paige Ott, you not the running back who is the probably the second biggest transfer portal signing for them has been banged up. Sounds like he's going to be okay long term, which I think is important because I don't think Mateer can do this by himself.
Absolutely. Let's go into the chat for a little bit. Cool Fire says Tennessee is too low for me. I would probably agree. And then it says, people are wondering how Alabama is ranked above Tennessee. And I think that's just meant to make Tennessee fans mad because every year we have this conversation in the AP poll because the Tennessee fans do not like to see Alabama above them, especially after a performance like that. I kind of get it. I
Uh,
understand that. We'll
yeah,
side with you on this.
it's really weird in the early weeks when you have a team that's 0-1, right? That is ranked above your team that was 1-0 and put up points. So
Yes.
where do you put Alabama? Do you drop them out in time? I wouldn't have an issue with that. It is interesting that it's always Tennessee though. How many shows have we done where that is the case and it's one of the primary topics? It's a little weird. Not expecting that to be a week one thing, but here we are.
Yeah, no, it's always a topic of conversation.
Yeah.
At 17, we have SMU, obviously not a tough opponent this week, putting up big numbers, college football playoff team from last year. I think this is a good spot for them. I don't think we want to over or underreact to week one on that. I think maybe they were, hyped because of last year's performance, but thoughts on them at 17?
I have no problem with them right now, but if back to Tennessee, you can make an argument Tennessee that those two teams could flip right
Flip,
now.
yep.
All that being said, Baylor coming up is a really interesting game. I think these teams have a little bit more teeth. The Baylors of the world, we saw TCU, right? There's a little bit more teeth in some of these conferences than we thought. I think that game is going to give SMU some fits.
We've got a what rank are you most surprised by in this poll? And people are saying Florida State at 14. Okay.
Too low, too high?
Yeah, what do we think there, chat? Give us if you think Florida State is way too high and we're overreacting to that. But Iowa State, we've got a good resume sort of and a look at this team so far. How do you feel about Matt Campbell's team?
Yeah, I mean, it's this is where you look at week one and a team like Kansas State, who they beat, who fell outside the top 25 here, right? Only two teams
Yes,
fell because they
I'm
almost
glad they
lost to
did.
North Dakota. They should have fallen. So, what does that mean if Kansas State almost lost to a team that, no offense, North Dakota State fans, isn't very good? What does that mean for Iowa State that struggled, albeit in an off surface across the world? We don't have to wait long. So again, a lot of the theme is like we'll find out. Iowa State plays Iowa, rivalry game that I've lived for a really long time. Iowa didn't exactly dazzle, shocking, in their opener, but that's a tough game. It's a field goal spread. It's played at Ames. If they win that through 3 weeks, 3 games, it's a pretty good resume. Kansas State and Iowa would be about as strong as we're going to see, especially with some of the cup games coming up for some of the bigger teams.
Yes. The chat a bit upset that Michigan fell and is at 15. Of course, we know that Florida State was pushed forward based on their performance against Alabama, but Michigan, solid week one performance. Bryce Underwood, obviously the topic of conversation. How they would rebuild that defense, of course. They're going to be challenged next week, but I do think, or I guess this week. But this last week was a pretty solid performance, and I think this is a fair spot for them. I know it's frustrating that they got moved down, but that's the nature of these preseason polls.
Michigan fans, you got to chill, right? You got a chance.
You're
You
gonna get
you
there.
you win this game, you're in the top 10.
Yep.
But I don't know why they're mad about anything. Like Bryce Underwood is legit. He
Hmm.
is legit. You watch this game, and
Enjoy it.
I know they're playing one of the worst defenses from a year ago, but you watch the ball come out of his hand, you watch his presence and poise, mechanics, all those scout sayings, and he looks like he's going to be an exceptional player. Like jumped off the screen. Him versus Mateer. Again, that is, I know there's not a plethora of like great games in terms of just 1v1, watching those two guys size it up. I can't wait because I think he's going to be as advertised.
All right, let's get to Florida State. Lots of conversation in the chat about why they are as high as they are. Um, I I
What,
don't know that I would have. I think I hate to say this, but I do think they're a little high for that performance because of how bad Alabama looked. But I will say that they cooked pretty well.
but whose performances at playing teams is better? Like Utah, like that's a misrank, right? LSU, we'll talk about them. Ohio State, we'll talk about them. What are we doing if we can't reward a team for beating them the way that they did? It's not just that they won, it's that they dominated. This is a completely revamped roster. If we're not comfortable ranking them in the top 10, we're just going off of preseason expectations, which
So you
mean
think they should be
nothing.
higher?
I think they should be in the top 10. I absolutely think they should be in the like I think they if we're going off actual results, then I think we're this is too low. Like voters are just hedging their bet.
Okay. Voters are
Because
trying to be safe. Well, but also that's the nature of this sport, though, is that these polls are based off of just weekly snapshots, not long term and where these voters think they're going to end
correct.
up or what they're going to do. So that does lean into your point a little bit. But I also think just seeing how bad Alabama played, that I think also has to be a factor. But I will say, not
Yeah.
I the chat obviously thinks that they're too high. They're maybe not buying into the hype, but again, this team does actually look. I mean, that Florida State team, we're going to give him credit and props to Tommy Castellanos for calling his shot. Also, shout out Gus Malzahn. I guess we have to always just having Alabama's number. But I don't want to overreact to it. So I actually think this is probably a good spot for them because you do have to react enough to be like, yeah, they
Yeah.
deserve the respect for beating an Alabama team because that roster is filled with all Americans. They just didn't play like that at all. But it is okay to give them a little hype. I don't know that I'd throw them into the top 10. Would
I,
you have them at 10?
I would probably have them at 10. I
Okay.
to your point, just to dissect the team. Castellanos gives them an element that they have not had. And having him paired up with Gus Malzahn, who was throwing shade left and right, and good on him. But not just that. Kind of a theme this week and this year is how much you can do to completely redefine your roster. It's basically going to be a theme we talk about the rest of the way. I was super impressed. So regardless of what the rankings say, this is a team now, when you look at who they're playing, they play Miami here coming up in what, 3 to 4 games. Um, and they play at Clemson. This is a team that we have to account for in the ACC that I wasn't doing that to start the year. I think we have to recalibrate a bit here.
Yeah, and recess. Totally fair. At 13, we have the Florida Gators. How do we feel about 13?
This is a team that I thought was getting a little bit too much hype. Long Island University didn't stand a chance, right? There's a lot of those games. And they play South Florida this week. And then it's LSU time, right? So LSU, Miami, Texas A&M. How about that? So with Florida, again, they'll show us very soon how real they are. If Lagway's healthy, I think they've got a shot. And we got to give this team a lot of credit because a year ago we were talking about them. Well, we weren't talking about them, right? Because this was the start of the year. They lose to Miami and they played their way back into the discussion. It does feel like that program has turned a corner.
Arizona State, lots of hype coming into the year. Played pretty solid this first week, but next week, obviously going on the road. A very big topic of conversation for their head coach, alluding to the fact that they don't really love going into small towns. Should be interesting to
Oof.
see what they do. And you sort of maybe have dropped a hot take on me right before we went live here. You want to
When
share with the class?
I will share with the class. Yeah, when they played Mississippi State last year at home, they struggled. I think they're going to lose this game. And I say this, you know this. I'm a fan of Arizona State, of Sam Levitt, of Jordan Tyson, who both showed out. They got a bit of a slow start against Northern Arizona, the Lumberjacks, by the way, for those asking. I think this is a really tricky road trip against a team that's not great, but I think it's a really weird spot for an Arizona State offense that replacing Scatterbo, and there's some new pieces there. Yeah, it would not shock me at all to see an upset.
Illinois at 11 and South Carolina at 10. These are two teams that I think we talked about that are like right on that outside edge of being dominant in their conferences or being with the big boys in their conferences. Thoughts on week one for them and maybe what the rest of this season might look like?
So Illinois, Western Illinois, that was a blowout, right? Good
Yeah.
QB play, but they play Duke this week, and that spread is under a field goal. So I know it's
Yes,
a Duke team that you like quite a bit, right?
I
That
do.
we're sleeping on some, but
They can get themselves ranked next week. Duke fans,
they
don't sleep.
absolutely can. No, you're absolutely right. Like, that's another team that could really jump in. South Carolina, really interesting game. Again, if we're evaluating Just Lenora Sellers as a passer, I think could be one of the most exciting players that we have in all of college football. You got some Beamer ball working its way into there, albeit
Yes.
in a really weird spot. Good, not an easy opening game for them. So I thought they played well. And, they've got a lot of talent at wide receiver, at quarterback, a lot of speed there. They're going to be a tough out.
All right, let's get into 1 through 9 here because the chat really has some opinions. So we've got Notre Dame at 9. Let me check out what the chat has to say.
Always have
South
Notre Dame.
Carolina not being over Clemson and Notre Dame is a joke. Okay, I'm going to start there. I disagree. Um, Look, Clemson did not play their best game. LSU, again, you got to give them credit for what they did. That defense turnaround is insane, but we will get to that. This wasn't a bad performance by Clemson. They were still in the game. It was just not their best game. And I feel like I'm still going to think of them as a college football playoff team. And same goes for Notre Dame against a Miami team that also looked very good. I think the one thing we can't do is overreact to top 10 matchups. And I think the Alabama game was like a completely different animal because of how they lost. I think the other teams that lost this weekend in Texas, Clemson, and Notre Dame, all still college football playoff teams, in my opinion, and didn't have enough for me to be alarmed by any of that.
I'd say watching Notre Dame get pushed around by Miami a bit was not something I expected to see. Kudos to
Hmm.
Miami. We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
I thought CJ Carr, you flashed both the good and the young inexperience. I thought he made some really good throws. The play calling there, I thought could have expanded. How many screen passes do we have to see? And saw Miami take advantage. So got to get Jeremiah Love going. Weren't really able to do that. I think Carr is going to be a work in progress, but there's a lot to like. I'm with you. It's a resilient team. They haven't lost their attitude. They were in that game despite falling behind early and looking like it might get away from them. So and then for Clemson, look, this is a team that I liked a lot. I was surprised that Klubnik kind of looked like the old Cade Klubnik, albeit against a really
Yeah.
revamped defense. Again, pushed around a bit. They're going to find some help with the running game. They got some great wide receivers, but they got to find a little bit more balance and push back up front on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, and with Texas at 7, I would argue that they probably had the worst performance out of these three teams at 7, 8, 9. I mean, I understand that again, they went on the road to Ohio State and maybe not shouldn't drop that far because again, but there were still questions for me. Like obviously Arch's performance is one we can look at, but I also want to say Arch was not fully responsible for them playing as bad as they did. They beat themselves. The penalties on offense were ridiculous.
Yeah.
Just the play calling again also kind of in question there. I don't say put it all on Arch's shoulders, but I think again it was not there were things that he could have done that should have done that checked the easy boxes that he didn't that I think were a bit more alarming than what we saw from Klubnik and even a Notre Dame team.
Texas held Ohio State to 203 yards. They averaged 4.5 yards a carry. Those, if you told me they would do that, you'd say they won the game. But
Yeah.
Arch was ineffective. He'll get better. Some of the bunny throws were really bad when I
Yes.
went back and rewatched the game. Some of the tougher throws were really good. It's concerning. It is. It's concerning. I thought the play calling wasn't great either. There's a long way to go, and the schedule is tough. So they got to get Arch. It's a tough assignment playing in the horseshoe that early. So I think we can be honest and say the guy's not ready just yet, and also
Yeah.
say there's a lot to work with there.
So the Haymaker in the chat said people need to chill on Arch. They're acting like he's horrible. OSU is good. Okay, let me just say this. On our podcast last week, I said that I thought that Ohio State had more pressure to win that game than Texas. And I know all the hype with Arch, but I also was like, if Arch goes on the road and doesn't play well, that at Ohio State against a really good defense, that to me is not something where we're like, oh, Arch is terrible and this is never going to work out. So I think the problem was is that he had such big expectations and people really blew it up. And you said to me on our podcast, you were like, hey, you're probably being a little bit more reasonable than we are nationally because of the fact that like this is Arch Manning, the last name, and Texas and Sark and all these things. And Ohio State lost so much, but I think that outcome of that game was the least surprising to me, I think,
Yeah.
out of all of them.
Good news. San Jose State,
Yeah.
UTEP, Sam Houston at home. Plenty of time to get right before you play Florida and Oklahoma, and then obviously the home stretch of Georgia and Texas A&M. I think it's a good time. You got the seasoning of this. It didn't go great. Now you get right, and then we'll see what we have against the Gators.
Yes. So chill on Arch, everybody. We got it. Number 6, we've got Oregon. Thoughts?
I
I
was
have
just,
thoughts about this next week.
yeah, I was just looking at how many Oregon players carried the football. There was like 40 guys. I've never seen anything like it.
Yes.
So you beat Montana State. Dante Moore looked good. I mean, that's again what we're looking at early on for Oregon. You got a ton of speed. You got a ton of skill guys. You got good play up front. It was Montana State, TBD. But want to see more throw. Want to see him in action. I thought he looked good, albeit against a team he should look good against.
Yes. They are playing Oklahoma State, and there was a little bit of
It's gonna be bad.
conversation going on. Mike Gundy said they spent $7 million on their rosters over the last 3 years, and Oregon spent 40 million on their roster last year. Dan Lanning asked about that, and he said, if you want to win, you got to invest. And kind of chuckled at it. So if you're someone who bets, I would probably take Oregon in that game with even with that big spread, just because
28 and a half. That's a
I mean,
big
I'm not gonna
number.
lie to you. He's gonna run up that score as much as he possibly can.
I
That
agree
is
with you.
going to be crazy. Also, shout out to Corey Moore for that pancake in the end zone, and also just hilarious that he was blocking the wrong guy. That comment from Dan Lanning was so funny, but very fired up freshman and a guy we'll definitely be
He's gonna be
talking about
good.
as they play some tougher competition. At 5, we have Miami. So I know the chat had some takes on Miami. Um, and maybe don't love them this high. Your thoughts?
I'm fine with them this high. I was really impressed. Offensive line, incredible. I thought Beck looked really good. Made some really good plays under pressure. Ruben Bain is a dude. I mean, that guy is unbelievable. This is a team that feels a little different than Miami teams in the past. It's not just the quarterback and friends like last year, which I thought at times it was.
Yeah,
This is a
the
team that
defense.
that was built right. My concern, unfortunately, is the head coach who took a delay of game coming out of the half, and clock management is a challenge. I think Mario Cristobal is a great recruiter and a developer, but I have concerns there. I don't have a ton of concerns about the roster. I love what I saw.
Absolutely. Sorry, I was just leaving in the chat and laughing. At 4, we've got Georgia. I mean, they seem like they're going to be fine, but not much to write home about.
No, but you got a new quarterback who last year we saw in Stockton who was thrown into a really tough situation against Notre Dame. We thought he played well. His receivers dropped passes, he was hit. He looked good. What, 70 yards rushing? Like that was Stetson-esque, if I may say so. I know you love hearing
Oh,
that.
geez.
I'm sorry, but you're right. The schedule for them gets brutal pretty soon as well, so we'll figure out a lot more.
Yeah. So I'm gonna go into the chat for LSU. How is LSU not number 2? And then we've got LSU is the best team in college football coming from a Vol fan. Wow, okay. All
I
right.
don't know who we are
That is
anymore.
huge. Let's get into LSU. I was surprised, and I know that that seems crazy because they had the number 1 transfer portal class. They were returning Garrett Nussmeier, but I think defensively, that performance against a very good Clemson offense was amazing. I mean, let's give Harold Perkins his flowers for coming back and looking the way that he did, one of the best defenders in the country. I mean, this LSU team is legit national championship contender. Lee Corso knew what he was talking about clearly. Um, Obviously the respect of Clemson is here because they are at 3 because Clemson is a very good teams, but or is a very good team. But I'm curious, one, how you think this is gonna go moving forward, and do you think now they have a target on their back and they're gonna get everybody's best in the SEC?
Well, I think it's LSU. They were always going to get that anyways. And
Yeah,
the two issues that I had with them, like I questioned, could the defense remake itself in 1 year? We'll find out, but it looks like it. The speed is outrageous everywhere,
yeah,
everywhere. The speed is outrageous, and they seem to kind of have that attitude back, albeit in a one game sample size. I love these weapons. That little cross play for Aaron Anderson is diabolical. And if Nussmeier does not turn the ball over and get some time, he can be really good. I mean, last year he was really good. So if you want to make an argument that LSU should be number 2, I have no problem with that. I can't tell you like, hey, overreact now. That was incredibly impressive. And this is what we should be doing with the AP poll is treating these results for what they are. I agree. You can make a solid case that LSU should be number 2. And I think this team, to your first question, is going to be a problem moving forward.
Someone in the chat, Drew, said LSU should not have jumped UGA. That's wild against a Clemson team who is always disappointed. I mean, I wouldn't say they've always disappointed. They've got some national
Oh,
championships to prove
I
it. So I think that again, to the point that I made, I think it's the respect that AP poll voters have for this Clemson team and how good they actually are. But to your point, I think they could be a little higher. At two, we have Penn State. So a team that people are always going to say is overhyped. I think. I don't know if anyone in the chat has a problem with Ohio State being one. But I think you could make the case that maybe LSU should have jumped to two. Do you
yeah.
think you could make the case for LSU jumping to one over Ohio State after a win versus Texas?
No, I would keep Ohio State there. I think that was a solid enough win. It was ugly. So in terms of optics, you could say LSU had probably the most convincing win.
Hmm.
And I'm okay with Penn State, being in this area. Right now, 46-11, which is a really strange score. They won. What are we going to take away from beating Nevada by a lot? Not much. But there was wide receivers catching passes for Penn State. Like that's a start, right? That was the really good news for Penn State. For Ohio State, I liked what I saw from Julian Sayin. I don't know how you felt. I know he wasn't asked to do a ton. So much this week, Paige thematically was like like take the training wheels off these quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Like let them go, let them make mistakes. You're going to have to win with them. We heard Ryan Day kind of admit that afterwards. They lost 14 players to the NFL draft. I know Arch Manning didn't look great. On the other side of that, I thought the Ohio State defense played a really good game. I would switch LSU and Penn State. I'd probably have Ohio State still at number one.
A Michigan fan in the chat
Oh boy.
literally said, Michigan fan, Ohio State is definitely number one right now. Right. Should Ohio State be number one? The people agree Ohio State should be number one. Also, there was a comment in the chat earlier that I wanted to wait till we got through the rankings to talk about it, but it was like, it's week one, guys. This is all we know is just week one results, which is a fair assessment. So do you think there's anyone on this list that maybe we are overreacting to? I know you said at the top of the show, this is the time to overreact, but if you had to pick one team that were maybe overreacting to their week one result, who would you pick?
I don't see necessarily a ton. I think for teams that were in the top 25 that had relatively easy games, we're giving them the benefit of the doubt, and they're just kind of maintaining, right? The Oklahomas, the SMUs of the world. Iowa State has actually beaten a team. We think Kansas State. Who knows if they're a team or not? But they
Yeah,
are a real
I
team. Yeah,
don't.
yeah.
That's why they're out.
But that's why they're out. But they're at least it's a resume builder. So I don't know if I think this is the name of the game is to use the results to properly react. And this is the challenge that we have at this point in the season with preseason rankings. So, no, I don't necessarily see a problem. I think we've underreacted. I think LSU should be number two. I think Florida State should be higher. Miami, because of where they started, seems to be in a fair position. Every team on here will get a chance to sink or swim. Michigan
Yeah.
fans not happy with their ranking. Guess what? You go win this week, and that changes a lot. They'll be in the top 10.
You win this week, and I've been saying it all
Uh,
offseason, that the rest of your schedule is super manageable and you could
yes.
literally walk into the college football playoff. Even if, I mean, I said even if they lose their two big games to Oklahoma and Ohio State, I think Michigan is going to be a team that, with the rest of that schedule, really could make their way into the playoff. So Michigan fans, keep it tamed. But yeah, I'm very excited to see that Oklahoma Michigan game because I think that's going to tell us a lot about those two conferences and how they're going to shake out,
I,
honestly.
I I think just looking at the chat too, two teams to back to your point, Utah and Tennessee should be higher. As we're like downloading all this information, Utah and Tennessee had really good wins against reasonable opponents, not cupcakes. They should be getting more respect than I think they're getting right now.
In the chat, England Matthew D said, I'm a Miami fan and I don't trust being top 10, unfortunately. We will more than likely get thrashed this year. So, what I will say about that was to your point earlier, you know how a lot of times when we talk about Penn State and how good their roster is, and everyone always, the chat is always saying James Franklin, James Franklin. I think we got to start talking about that with Mario Cristobal.
Well,
Like great recruiter, but we've seen some of the in-game
I,
situations like you brought up. That could be a good point. That could be a good point that like they could have the pieces, but who you play and how you play them could end up
I
not being that great.
I'll say this. I don't know if there's anybody on that schedule that will thrash them. They may do some dumb things and clock management to lose a game, but physically, I mean, what I do love is that game against Florida State now is like wildly compelling. And that was not a game that I had on my radar that like this is going to be must see, do everything you can to watch because that is two remade teams that look the part. So they play Florida and Florida State in back-to-back weeks, then play Louisville, a team that I think is going to have some time in the top 25 here at some point. Really interesting schedule. But no, I don't think they're going to get thrashed. I will think they will compete in every game, but they do have to find a way to stop, stubbing their toe in really unnecessary situations.
Yes. One last team that I do want to mention that is not in the top 25 that I think we will eventually see in the top 25 is TCU. So
Oh
I know a
yeah.
lot of people will say, pump the brakes. They played UNC. UNC wasn't good besides that first drive, all of those things. But that TCU defense in the Big 12 is going to be a problem. I genuinely believe that. I think that all, I mean their offense we already knew was going to be good. Defensively, how solid they're going to be against some of the opponents in the Big 12. I think they're going to stifle a lot of offenses, and it's going to be an interesting case for them in that conference.
Either that or North Carolina is like hellaciously bad. And both things may be true. Um,
Yeah, I was going to say.
no, but like they were of the teams getting votes. BYU, Auburn, Georgia Tech, Southern Cal, Louisville, and then TCU. I'm actually a little surprised that they weren't a little bit higher because of how convincing that was. Shows, I think, how little some of the voters respect what UNC might be. But I'm totally with you. That is a team that when the quarterback is under control, is a real threat to win pretty much everybody they play against.
Yeah, and I will say he did look better than last year in terms of decision making outside of like maybe two plays last
Yep.
night. So, very exciting stuff. Well, guys, that is all we have for you today. We could talk about this for hours, but unfortunately, we cannot. You can find us at the No Punts Allowed, a podcast where we will be diving more into this stuff, previewing next week. But as always, we appreciate you guys coming to hang out. For Paige and Adam, we will talk to you all next week.